Hello, everybody. And just want to welcome everybody to another one of our Intent Architect webinars. I hope everybody can hear me loud and clear. And I see we've got a great turnout today. So very, very exciting webinar to take you guys through. The first thing I could just mention is that if anybody here doesn't know who I am, I'm one of the co-founders of Intent Architect. I do have an engineering background. And I'm very excited to take you guys through today's webinar because today we're going to be showcasing something that we've been working on for months, right? We've been actually about 9 months of development, specifically on the new version of Intent Architect. If you guys have been following our releases, you'll see that there were several releases that have been building up capabilities in Intent Architect to bring us to this point where we can showcase to you guys the automation of front-end development in Intent Architect, and this is a huge milestone for us, as well as you could say just a step along the way, right? This is actually something that I'll talk about in a minute, but we're really seeing this as the version 0.1 of what is yet to come. So this is this is just a step in the journey towards really, really great things that we have in mind and on the roadmap. The other thing I just wanted to just mention is as part of today's webinar, I have the team on the call in the background. So if you guys have any questions, you feel free to just shoot those questions while I'm presenting. They'll happily answer those questions in the background, and those answers will then be available for everyone to see. And just to give you an idea of what we want to cover as part of today's webinar, the first thing is I want to show you guys the setting up of a Blazor application. That's essentially the technology. We're going to be using Blazor and MudBlazor to automate out a front-end application. And so I'm going to show you guys how we can quickly get that set up. After that, we can then jump into creating use cases, something that's simple but also quite comprehensive, and wiring that up to a back-end system. As part of the UI capabilities that we're bringing to the table, Intent Architect essentially, we've released a new version. We've got 4.3 that's basically out now. It's in its final stages of beta. We're probably going to be releasing it in the next day or two. So it is very, very stable. We're very happy with it. A lot of it's just been in preparation for the webinar as part of this release. And I'll be taking you guys through a lot of the features and functionality that's come in with version 4.3 as part of the demo today in building out this Blazor application. So that's what we're going to go through next is after we've spun up the application, we're going to go through building out some actual use cases and show you guys how all that works. After that, I want to show you guys a sample application that we've set up. It didn't take us long to set it up. Of course, the work that has been done to get to the point where we could set it up was really where the effort went in. But it's just something, if we had a bit more time on this webinar, we could have built, but we won't have enough time as part of today's webinar. But at least it gives you an idea of some of the things that we can do with Intent Architect, and we can show you. I can take you guys through that. It is publicly available, and I'll give you guys an idea of where you can find that. And then the last thing I wanted to show you guys as part of today's session is I want to show you guys how we can do some customizations, because of course, very, very key to the Intent Architect way is that you can do anything, right? There's nothing, Intent Architect is here to automate the predictable and repetitive work for us. But when it comes to being able to customize, control, manipulate our code, Intent Architect we can get it out the way very, very easily. We've got awesome merging systems, and those have now been extended into the Razor space. So very, very exciting. Few things that I can just also mention just before we jump in. Today we're automating Blazor and MudBlazor code, right, and C# code. But the designs and the way that we've set up the capabilities inside of Intent Architect to be able to do this in Blazor and MudBlazor is done in such a way that we can apply this to other frameworks and other languages. So we could apply this quite easily to the Angular space, to the React space, to the Vue.js space, and so on so forth. We can essentially take this into the other languages, but we've started with MudBlazor and Blazor for the time being because firstly, it's C#, so it's not a huge jump from from some of the automation that we're doing already. That was the one reason. The second reason was because it was one of the most requested technologies by all of our clients. So we decided to focus there. But I do want to make sure that everybody understands that this is something that will expand. It is on our roadmap to bring this into the other languages. It's just something that we want to get right first in one language before we roll it out to the others. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I can also mention that I'm going to do is I'm going to allow myself to intentionally run into some issues without preempting them and trying to avoid them so that you guys don't see them. I'm going to allow myself to just kind of walk into the walls and show you guys what happens, so that you can see the problem as and when I run into it, and you can see how I solve that problem, because these are things that you guys, if you are going to be testing this stuff out, it's very likely that you could run into the same issues, and I want to make sure that you guys at least have an idea of how to solve those issues. So that's one of the other things I can mention. And yeah, that's really everything I wanted to cover before we jump in. So I'm very excited. And without further ado, let's jump in. I'm going to share my screen. That should be sharing now. And you guys should see an instance of Intent Architect open. All right, so let me just move this out the way so that I can see what I'm doing over here. And I can move that out the way. All right, perfect. So as you guys can see here, we've got version 4.3.0 beta 13. Lucky number 13. We just were joking about this before the call, that we just hope that this is a sign that the demo gods will be in our favor today, but we'll see what happens. All right, so I'm going to jump right in, and we've got this empty solution over here that I've created, and this is really just a solution so that we can get started. And what I want to do is I'm just going to show you guys very quickly, if we want to spin up a new Blazor application, we've created this new application template called Blazor Web Application Standalone. That's because it's really a standalone. We were, you could say, umming and ahhing between doing a standalone app for the demo today or just plugging it into, for example, a clean architecture. You can do both. But I'll do a standalone app because it's very likely that teams would probably experiment with the Blazor in a standalone fashion and connect it up with maybe some of their existing systems just to see how it all works. All right, so we're going to go ahead and I'll create an application. We'll call it webinar. Let's call it Blazor, like that. And we can say next. And what this is going to give us now is just the very basic options that are available to us, that we've essentially, these two modules are the main ones. So we've got Blazor. We've explicitly said here, this is a beta. The reason we're calling these beta is, even though they're very, very capable, stable, and work very, very well, we do want to manage the expectations for our clients. We do see ourselves making shifts and changes, and we just want to, if people are going to be, if users are going to start experimenting with these things, we just want to essentially give them a heads up that things may change, and that when those things change, there may be a little bit of rework that is required. But our team will be very happy to guide you guys through that when it happens. But that's part of our expectation management. The Blazor is really just the core Blazor systems. And then we need a component library, and the one that we've picked for the time being is MudBlazor. Having myself played around with MudBlazor a fair amount, I'm a fan. I really do like it. I think it's got an awesome set of components that are available, and it's free. So we did look at some other component libraries, and I think this one won. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the best one out there. We haven't looked at all of them, but it is a great one. So, and we've been very, very happy with it up until this point. And then we've just got Fluent Validation and the HTTP clients. They're all selected by default, because of course you're going to want to be able to do validations, and of course you're going to want to be able to talk to other applications. So we'll just use the service-to-service invocation and the HTTP clients. All right, so let's kick that off, and we can create this application. It's essentially going to spin it up. So right now it's just downloading and caching all of those different modules for us. And once that's finished, we can run the software factory execution. All right, there we go. And I'm just going to run the software factory execution. And this is going to go and basically set up our application. So here's all the changes. It's a very simple application. So let's just jump right into it. I'm going to just open it up. And here we can see in Visual Studio, it's just the standard structure, very typical, with our hosting application over here, and then our actual WebAssembly client over here. All right. So we can just hit F5, and this can build, and we can launch it up, and I can just show you guys what just comes right out the box. Any second now. There we go. All right, so this is what we get. Okay. You guys will see here, we've got, just the nav bar. If we click on this, it takes us to a navigation page. We've got some options over here, like profile, takes us to a profile, a my account, and a logout. And we can return home. And of course, this was just all automated by Intent Architect. And we can come into the actual app over here, take a look at the pages. We can see here's the home page, for example. That's your very simple, hello world, welcome to Intent Architect. Here's our example page. You can see it's just got some basic bindings on a title, which is coming in from the roots over there. So something just to, if you just launch this up and you fire up Intent to Architect, fire up this application and Intent to Architect automated, you will end up with an application that you can navigate around and you can see how everything works. All right. I'm not going to get into exactly how this app has been, just the default's been set up over here, but here's our 2 pages. And we're going to get into this designer in a few minutes. But before we do that, and before we get into actually using these designers, it's going to really help if we can just spin up a quick backend so that we can talk to some kind of a data source and some kind of an API, so that when we spin up our use cases, we can actually have them do things. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create myself a clean architecture. We'll just call this webinar.backend. And let's just, the only thing that I probably want to bring in is just value objects, and I'll explain why in a second, as a pattern. And yeah, so that's all basically just ready to go over here. And we can spin that application up in the background. And this is just going to set up a clean architecture for us, essentially bootstrap up a clean architecture for us, so that we've got a backend that we can work with. If you're not familiar with Intent to Architect, this is where we've been spending most of our time automating code, is on the backend systems. We've got a huge amount of patterns in that space. So we're just going to set up a backend very, very quickly for ourselves over here, just so that we can work with this. And what I also want to do is I'm not going to go and actually model out a domain, because that would slow us down. And we do want to cover a lot of things over here. So what I'm going to rather do is I'm just going to go and copy from another application, an existing domain. You can open up that diagram. And this is essentially the domain that we'll be working with. I can just delete that other diagram over there. So very, very simple domain. It's a invoicing domain, right? So we've got customers and we've got invoices and we have products. And so this just gives us an opportunity to essentially create these invoices that we could, put together some kind of a mail system and send these invoices to customers at the end of the day. Okay, so that's our domain. I've just pushed save over here. You see the software factory flashing. That's because it's just going to implement this domain for us and the persistence. It's using entity framework by default, so I'm just going to go ahead and apply that. And then I'm going to head over to the services. And what we can do now is I'm just going to go set up some CRUD services for the customer. It's going to create all of those. I can also just expose these as HTTP endpoints. So that's just going to give us, the roots, all very standard stuff. I'm sure for those of you that are familiar with this. The only other thing I maybe want to do here is I just want to take a look at the customer DTO and what is returned. And I actually want to fetch out the full address information, just so that we've got all of that information over here. All right, so I'm going to push save then. Software factory is going to run. And this is going to set up, there's our commands, our handlers. So this is the mediator paradigm that we've got over here for the commands and the queries, our validators, and so on and so forth. And there's our controller. If we're happy, we can say apply changes. And that's our backend for now, right? So we can come back to the backend, expose some more services if we need. But I think what you guys are here for is to focus on the front end side of things. So let's go head back to our front end and let's start building out our first use case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder. Let's call it customers. So we're going to want to, let's say, have a table, some kind of a data grid to showcase our customers. We're going to want to be able to add these customers, maybe edit them, maybe even delete them. So I'm going to show you guys how we can build out some of those very predictable and repetitive aspects of front-end development, and we can do this very, very quickly. So let's start off by creating ourselves a new component. By default, because it's under the pages folder over here, it will be considered a page, and we can call this let's call it customer list. Then what I can do is I just use a shortcut there, control space, but I'll show you guys where we can get to that in a second. I can launch up the binding. So if you guys are familiar with front-end development, you'll know that bindings are pretty much how most of the modern, especially SPA related frameworks work. It's all based on observer patterns. I mean, unless it was AngularJS, in which it was a dirty pattern. But ultimately, the end goal is that you've got a view and you've got a view model that is essentially communicating with each other. So this is on the left over here, our component would be considered the view model, and there's our view on the right. And so what I can do is I can go and add a property. And this is really the thinking. Okay, I've got my model, my page. What data do I want to show on that page? Well, I would want to put a page result on this, and I would want this to be the customer DTO. Now, you guys will notice immediately I can't find the customer DTO. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to allow myself to walk into certain walls. That's because what we need to do is we need to go and add the backend services as a reference. Okay, and I need to go and create a proxy over here for our customers. So I'm just going to select all of them. That's fine. So those are all the endpoints available on that backend. I can say done. There's our proxy, and I can come back. Let me just show you guys how I'm getting there. We can go manage view bindings over here, control space. right? And I can add a model. It'll be a page result, and I can set this to be not another page result. I can set this to be a customer DTO. Now, one of the key features that we've built in, so the first thing I can mention as part of 4.3, because I want to take you guys through some of the new stuff in 4.3 as part of this, is that 4.3 you'll see gives us a lot more control from a designer perspective while we're in both of these paradigms. So we can do a lot of editing over here as well as a lot of editing on this side, right in here inside of the advanced mapping system. And we can also have access to things like these accelerators, which can do a lot of the work for us. So you can see I can basically automap this model over to a paginated table or to a data grid. Data grids are a bit more powerful. And so if I just click on this and say done, you can see what it's going to do is it's going to actually go and set up a data grid in my view here. These are all the different columns. I can rename these columns. So if I want to keep that to just city and maybe that to country and this to postal code, for example, I can do that. And I can create other bindings and things like that. So on row click, I could, for example, automap that to an operation. It's going to ask me which row ID. I would just need to connect that up over there to the ID of the data that we're dealing with. And if I say done now, that's essentially going to have wired up our customer list for us as a data grid. So if I push save now, we can watch the software factory execute. And this is going to set up, so this is all of our DTOs, commands, and validators and so on and so forth for our proxy. And then we've got our actual customer Razor page over here, which I can double click and I can show you guys. So this is just very straightforward. It's wired up to have, it's by default, by the way, I'll show you where the setting is, but by default, we've separated out the Razor pages from the code behind pages, code behind code rather. And that is based on what most of our clients have said is typically how they manage things, but you can decide which way you'd like. So if you'd like to have it all inline over here, that is absolutely an option as well. And here we can see the inline code that's been wired up for this. And all of this is just really empty at this point. This code here is just required for us to interpret the grid into a format which essentially allows us to take the page number, page size, and sorting out of it. All right, so I can go ahead and apply that, and that's going to set up our grid over there. I can also make that available to us from the, let's just do it from the main layout. I can go and take over this link that says add menu option over here, and I can change this to be something like manage customers. And let me just delete this link over here, and I will go and automate that to a different navigation, which I'll take to the customer list, and we can say done. Oh, sorry, I messed it up. Customer list. Thank you. There we go. And if we push save now, so that's just going to go and update our layout. We don't need to check on that, but we can come to this application now and we can push save. We can bring it back up. Let me quickly, I can see that this here is also waiting for the fetch data grid. What I want to do here is let me just quickly connect this up to a few more things that I would typically do. I wanted to show you guys step by step. So I'm going to go and connect this over to the get customers query. And I understand exactly what's going on here. All right. The problem is that I forgot to go and actually paginate this because the grid is expecting a paginated result. So let me just go paginate this result over here on the back end. That's going to go set that up for us over there. And we can circle back to our front end over here. And I just want to check now, this is a page result. There's our page result over here. And I'm going to go and connect this up now to that call. So let's go get customers, and now you can see it's asking me for all the page results, all the page number, the page size, and our order number, and it will return us a page result afterwards. So let's just connect all of these things up. You'll see that that one, these two are able to wire up automatically. I do need to connect this one up myself because the names are different, so of course it can't figure that out. And then we can go and we can wire up that the response will be set over to the model. So this is our actual model, if you guys recall, and we can say save, and we can run the software factory execution. And that's going to basically go and implement this for us. So there's our call to the system. Now you can see that this has been switched over to be an async call over here. And we can say apply changes over there. And what we should be able to see is that this code is, yeah, there we go. Everything's worked itself out. If we launch up this application, we can now go down manage our customers over here. And it's going to give us a 404 because, of course, we haven't actually told this application where our backend server is, and we haven't run our backend server either, which we're going to get to in a second. Okay, but it's going to be a bit boring if I manage to wire all of that up, and then we can't actually go and add records into this table over here. So let's go and do that quickly, and then we can go wire up the backend and connect all the systems together. So let's go and create our next page. We'll call this customer add, and once again, I'm going to go into the designer over here, and I'm going to go and add a model. We'll call this our customer DTO. Well, the model will be a type of customer DTO. Then what I can do is I can just push space if I want, just to use the shortcut over here, but this is essentially going to auto map it to the form. And what you can see this does is it automatically goes and sets up a form with a card inside of it, wires up all of the different fields over here, wires up the save, wires up a cancel for me. I can just go and remove out the city over here, and maybe the country, and maybe the postal code if we don't want to have everything, with the same names. And by the way, these things, if you guys know a little bit about module building, you can write them yourselves, right? This is just this is probably about I would estimate maybe a 30 to 40 line of code script that does all of this work over here. Okay, so it's really not a big deal. And these are things that you can build yourself in Intent Architect as modules, and you can plug them in and you can have them available to be able to do all kinds of structures and stuff for your front end. So if you have a particular way of working, you can just go and wire that up, and it's really not such a big deal. And we've got the ones that are all in the open source repos that are there as examples. So if you guys can see exactly how we've done the ones that we've done, so that it's clear how you guys can do them too. All right, so as you can see, we've got this all set up, but we need to also connect this back to the back end. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So let's make another call to the service operation. We'll do the create over here. And this is just going to require us to fill in the information. So here's all the information that we need. I can just drag this all across, and it's going to wire it up, and Intent can figure out most of where things need to go. If the naming is very, very conventional, we don't need to worry about the response, so I can just say done. And then the last thing that we probably need to do here is there's no way for us to get to this add page over here. We would need to create navigations between the add and the customer list. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go and create on the customer list. First off, I'm going to go on the toolbar, add a button. Let's create a button here. Let's call it add customer. I'm going to expand and just push spacebar. It's going to create the on-click operation for me over here. And on that on-click operation, I can go and say navigate to this page, and I want to navigate to the add page. Similarly, I can just copy that across and paste over here. I can navigate back to the customer list from one save, and for the cancel, I'll just do that over here. So what you guys will see, by the way, is this is something that we're going to be expanding on and adding more capability to in the future. But whenever you're dealing inside of an operation where essentially what we're doing here is processing and execution, this is the workflow, right? We can reorder these things around. We can do as many steps as we want. I can make a call to one service, a call to another service, fire up a dialog, maybe then do another call, and then do a navigation, right? I can do that all in step, and as long as each one succeeds, one after the other, it will continue down the chain. If any of them are opting out or fail, it'll then discontinue down the chain, and that is implemented in code. And that's an option, right? It's just there. We are aiming to bring these capabilities into Intent Architect because they can truly speed up a lot of work, but it is also an option. We can go and code this stuff ourselves. It's not something where one has to go and implement everything in that form. All right, so that's essentially going to wire up the navigations. There's our Razor page wired up for us over here. You can see the buttons. They've got the async processing to prevent the spam clicking already in place. So that's just a nice thing, right? So these patterns will evolve. I've got no doubt about that. But you want to get best practice patterns available in the modules. That's something that we're actually looking to our users, to the community, to tell us what they like, what they don't like, how we structured it is maybe there's a better way. And then we would be very happy to update the modules so that everybody gets those upgrades. And of course, if you want to do your own patterns and your own components and things like that, that's also a possibility. And the way that we've structured up the module building side of things for those teams that do in fact do module building is so that is in such a way that you can extend everything that we've done very, very easily, even set up your own modules from the ground up if you'd like. All right, so customer list over here is just going to add that button for us, and we can see in the back end side of things for that component, it's going to just take us to navigating to the customer add page. All right, let's go ahead and apply that. Now we can fire up that application and play with it, but like I said, we're still going to run into the same wall where it can't talk to the back end. So I'm going to launch up the back end. I just want to check that the software factory is clear over here. Yep, looks all good. So let's just launch up this backend system. And once we've got the actual, I mean, I can find the port without having to launch the app, but this is just the way I like to do it. Just launch up the app, and then I'll get my port number out of it. There it is. Then what I can do is I can circle back to the code for the Blazor application. And what we just need to do here is we need to go and update these app settings. So there's two places. We need to update on this side, and that's because we're in interactive auto. So yeah, stop debugging, thank you. So we are, the back end and the front end both do the calls to the system depending on what phase of the Blazor application you're in, or the Blazor application loading you're in. So we need to apply those app settings to both sides and put that port on in both locations. The next thing we can do is we can launch up this app. Server is running, and now I'm going to run into the next problem, which I'm sure you guys can guess what it is. Actually, that's pretty happy, it seems. Let's just take a look. I'm not sure why that's happy. Save. Press line 2. Okay, it actually seems happy. I'm surprised by that, to be honest. I think maybe I accidentally installed the cause stuff earlier. Maybe with an update. I didn't actually expect that to go through. This demo is full of fun today. So we've got, let's just see here. It's giving us a 400 over here. I think it's because of the address line 2 that's basically giving us a bit of uphill. Yes, I know why that is. That's because there's a bug in the 4.2 modules that's been fixed in the 4.3 that I wouldn't have run into. So once again, my mistake is punishing me. So those would have been nullable because address, if we look at the domain, is nullable. The line 2 is nullable, and of course we're getting a 400 because that's not acceptable. All right, so it is possible that you could run into those kinds of issues, but at least you guys can see how I'm resolving that. All right, so if we come back to our Blazor application, we should be able to just push save over here, and if Blazor is nice, it'll allow all of this stuff through. So by the way, you can see the validations all working out the box, right? So that's something that of course you want to see there. If we push save now, yeah, so it still seems to be a bit unhappy, but I think that's just simply because I need to relaunch up the backend. And we can just try again in a second once that backend's up. There we go. Okay. So yeah, we can go and add our different customers to the system, and you can see I've got people that you may know who they are, may not, I don't know. But I can go and put these, I can just go and add my customers over here. Other things that you guys will see that's already working is the sorting. That's part of what's nice about the MudBlazor grids is the sorting's already there. It can do quite advanced sorting. So you can do like a multi-field sorts and things like that. And how this is set up is it's set up, and the backend system uses dynamic link to work all this stuff out. So this stuff just works, right? And that's really great, and that's really what you want to see. Okay, so things just work right out the box. Okay, so we've got the app working to some degree. What we want to go to next is let's go and expand this so that we can edit. All right, so heading back to our user interface over here, let's go set up a new component, and we'll call this a customer edit. But in this case, I'm not going to make it a page because you guys have seen pages and you've seen navigations. I want to make it a dialog. So let's go make it a dialog. And you can see that by default, it immediately changes over to a little bit of a different diagram over here. And that's because the moment I call something a dialog in its name, it's going to add, we've added a little automation script to automatically go and add the dialog over here. So those are just cool little things. You can write your own. But these are just things that we want to have in place so that based on conventions, based on names, it pretty much knows exactly what you want to do. All right, so then the next thing, and you guys have probably noticed, is a bit of a paradigm to building out the front end. The first decision is, do I want a new component? Is it a page? Is it a dialog? What is the case? The next thing that you'll see I'm doing is I go into the bindings and I start to say, well, what data do I want to show? Well, I want to show, for example, another customer DTO. I'm going to make this one nullable. Okay. And I can then do the same step I did earlier where I can auto map this to the form. I can also go and, change the name of these things if I want. Let me see if I can just kill my teams over there. And I can say done if I'm happy with that. And you'll see it's giving me a little error over here. We've actually spent quite a lot of time. You'll see warnings and errors are a lot better in this version of Intent to Architect, and that's something that we're constantly improving. But you'll see if I click on this, it's going to give me a nice error over here as opposed to having to hover over it. If I click on that, it's going to take me to the error. It's going to show me this field is required. And if I click on that, it's going to actually highlight me this field you need to fix. And that's because this button should have a form that it knows to work with. And so I'm going to say done. And so that's going to wire it up. And the reason it had to do that is because this button is not inside of a form. Otherwise, it would know what form it's part of, right? So that's just something that you'll notice in 4.3 is that the error systems are a lot nicer. They guide you where you're supposed to deal with things and where the problem is. All right, so what else do we need to do here? Well, let's go and connect this up to the back end again. So I'm going to call update customers. And we can go and add, for example, we're going to need a field to come in over here, which will be our customer ID. So this field is what we're going to pass in to the dialog, right? And how I like to do it is I like to take this customer ID and set it to the backend ID over here, and then I'll use my model for all the other fields. Okay. And the reason I like to do that is because this, in a way, you'll get a 400 if these two IDs are different, right? The backend actually checks that. That's part of the default patterns. But the reason that I like to do it this way is because even though these two fields could be different, they shouldn't be. And so I would pick up a bug immediately if, and very, very early on, if something like that came along. So I can say done, and that's going to do our update for us. Then what we can do now is I can set this up, and this is another thing that you'll notice here is I've got these invocations. So I can actually call invocations from inside of Intent Architect to, in this case, close the dialog, okay? And that's very useful because when you say save, you do need to instruct when certain buttons are supposed to close the dialog. So if this is successful, it will then close the dialog. If it's not successful, it won't close the dialog, and we could do some error handling with this, okay? We could do the same here. We can call another invocation, and I'll connect this up to the cancel. So on cancel, it will then cancel the dialog over here. So that's going to basically just wire it up so that this dialog for us, if we say save, is going to update and close, and if we say cancel, it's going to cancel. And then the last thing we need to do here is on initialize. You'll see that we always get initialized by default. We can delete these in the cases when we don't need them, but this is more of a Blazor thing, and this has been set up so with the Blazor modules it automatically adds it. In Blazor, the on initialize async is something that you can fire, which or you can overload that method, and you can then do whatever you need to do. So in this case, we're going to call the backend to go fetch out our customer, and we're going to connect it up to this customer ID over here, and I'm going to go fetch that response, and I'm going to just set it on the model. So you'll notice with the backend calls, we've got two steps. We call the backend service, and then if there is a response, we can then map the response, and we can map the response back to how it's supposed to connect. And you can do quite advanced mappings. I'll show you guys some cool examples in the sample app that go a little bit further than what I'm showing you guys today, where we're actually using models as opposed to the DTOs, because DTOs, you can only go so far, right? As we all know, at some point you need to create front-end models, and you want those models to be mapped onto the DTOs. I'll show you guys a little bit about how that works later on. Okay, so that's going to connect that up for us. The only other thing that I need to do here is I need to say that this is a bindable. That's just part of this is part of Blazor, is essentially saying that this is something that you can pass in, but all of the different frameworks, whether it's Angular, it's an input, whether it's Vue, whether it's React, all of them will have ways to say this is a field that you will pass in either through the roots or in this case through a binding. And I can then go in my on data grid row clicked over here, and I can say, let's show a dialog. We'll call it edit customer. So I can write whatever I want the title to be over here, and I will call the edit dialog, and I can then connect this all up. So the row ID is what I'm going to pass in as the customer ID. Now, let's just think about this for a second. What is this going to do? When I click on the row, it's going to bring up our dialog. Okay. When I change the data and I push save, it's going to close the dialog. It's going to bring me back here. And this is a little bit of me preempting the issue because it's just a bit annoying to kind of go in a circle. But I'm explaining to you exactly what's going to happen, because what's going to happen at this point is we're going to say edit, we're going to push save, we're going to come back to our grid, and the grid's not going to have updated with the data change. So what I'm going to do here is I could do this in memory, but I'm going to do it by I'm going to tell the system to refresh the grid, and I'm going to do that with another invocation, and I'm going to connect that up to the reload server from the MUD data grid. So this is actually a type, and this is quite a cool aspect. This is certainly something new in 4.3, is that we can connect, we can get a little bit closer to the metal with things. So I can actually go and talk to very much the APIs of MudBlazor. And this is an example of me just communicating with this MUD data grid. And we could add all of the different operations that are available, as well as their parameters, and I could actually call those directly from Intent Architect if I wanted to. Okay, of course you can also code this stuff yourself. It's just here as an option, and it can really save you a lot of time. And prevent the switching back and forth. And you can also then copy these this metadata so much easier than it is to copy code and rewire things up very, very quickly as well. All right, so that's going to go wire up all of that for us. All right, so here is the this is our edit dialog. There's our form. All right, there's our option, our buttons, and the save, and so on and so forth. And here we can see what it's going to do. So there's our save. You can see the steps that it's going to take, right? So immediately it knows that you're trying to submit a form. So we're going to go validate the form. It's going to go and call the update customer async, and then it's going to call the dialog close, right? That's just that last little step that we put over there. And we've got this general catch-all pattern over here, which we're probably going to evolve over time. But you can see that any exceptions are just going to be caught and just launched up to the stack bar. So at least we get some feedback. But of course, it'll be nice to, throw in a different catch over here, for example, and, maybe pull out those validations and even have that happen automatically through the modules. So as a general pattern, or maybe we could route everything through a general exception handler. It's all just really up to us what we want, how we want things to work. All right, so I'm just going to check here what's happening inside of this one. Okay, so here this is just on our row click. Of course, nothing was happening there before. Now there is something happening over here. It's going to launch up our dialog. It's going to get the result. If the result is canceled, return. Otherwise, reload the server data. So that should basically cover everything. We can come back to our app. Server's running. Let's see if, yeah, no luck. I'm just going to tell it to always rebuild. So if you guys have worked with Blazor, that's something that isn't perfect, is their hot reload. It's not 100% clear to me why it works sometimes and why it doesn't. Sometimes I make the most minuscule change and then it tells me I need to reload. And then sometimes I make these huge changes and it seems to do the hot reload. So I really have no idea. Maybe Microsoft will fix it, but it does seem to be getting better, which is a good sign. Okay, so let's see if this works. If we click on that, there's our customer, and we can give Joel an account. So we'll call it a JT account 001, and we can say save. And you can see immediately the grid, is refreshing. Now it's happening very, very fast, of course, because I've got a local machine. Everything's happening locally, but of course we'd probably see it, give it the little async loader over here as part of the grid, and then we can do the same here with the Skulk VDM 001, and we can go and change these to, wherever, I don't know, where's C point. So anyway, you can see now what we've got is the ability to, sort things. We can obviously do, if we added Skulk for a second time here, we should be able to have that. Let's go and just set this to be Skulk VDM 002. And if we order these two and then need to do control, yeah, there you can see it flicks between those two over there. So all of that stuff's working. And that's really just to give you guys a bit of an idea of building out use cases. I think if I can be really quick about it, we can throw in a quick delete, but I'm not going to do the dialogue and stuff like that. You guys can see how we can do the dialogue. There's an example in the sample of doing the dialogue, but there is, in the last 15 minutes, there's a few last things I just want to cover for you guys before we wrap this up. If we wanted to do a delete, that shouldn't be a problem. We can just go add another component over here. We'll make it a button. We'll just call it the delete button. And I will want to, well, let me just go and drag that one to the top there. That'll just reorder things how I want. And I can go and just map that to an on delete. I can then go to the on delete over here and I can say, call an operation. Let's call it delete. And we can just pass in the ID and our delete's there. And we can also do things like, I can control the color, right? So I can make this an error color. And I can go and I can also do things like adding an icon, and I can say that the icon value is delete, okay? And we can say save and we can rerun that. And that's just gonna go and add in our button over here. There you can see our color, there you can see the icon is the delete icon. And we can go ahead and apply that. And let's see if MudBlazor is gonna be nice to us this time. Yeah, it did. Yeah. Okay. So if we click on that, there's our delete, right? If I say delete, it's going to actually delete it, but it's not going to close the dialog down. And so now we would probably have to, there you go, have to just refresh it ourselves. So that's what we would want to fix, right? If we did do a delete, we'd probably want to close it down. We'd probably want to actually launch up another dialog or something like that. If we wanted to do it from here, just to confirm, are you sure you want to delete this? But we would want to then just close down this dialog, and then the refresh will happen automatically for us. So we can just go ahead and apply that. Save. seem to work again. Let's just give it a go. We'll go delete Dundre. There we go. All right. So that's just to quickly show you guys the delete. So that just kind of ends this section of the demo. This is what I want to take you guys through. Just a very, very simple use case. Had a little bit of fun along the way, but I mean, no webinar or demo would be exciting if there wasn't a little bit of risk in actually building out some real code here. What I want to show you guys next in the last few minutes is I want to show you guys a sample application that we've set up. And this is one that's already available. If you guys want to pull it down, you can pull it down pretty much right after this webinar, grab the latest beta, beta 13, and you can get going. So let's just shut down these Visual Studios so that I can save a bit of space here, and just close those down. Just shut this down as well. There we go. And I'll just shut that window down. All right, so what I want to do is, this can go away, is I'm going to go over to this MudBlazor example application. Okay, so let me just shut everything down and I can take you guys through it. So it's exactly the same domain that I took you guys through a minute ago. It's services, but now the services have been rolled out for all the different endpoints. So we've got, so I meant to click on the diagram. So we've got the different diagrams here. So here's a single diagram showing us a couple of endpoints. And then if we look at the user interface, we've also got this diagrammatic aspect that I can show you how we can get this very, very quickly in the previous app, but this is just one where I just went and spent 2 minutes just laying this out for us so that we can see everything. And this is essentially what I call this diagram, I call the sitemap. And that's because this is essentially what it is. We've got our main layout, our homepage. We can see all the navigations through all the different screens. These are pages, those are dialogs, that's a component. So we can see that there's just this component that's actually been used. By the way, in a later release, we're actually going to get some lines that'll say that this and this actually uses that component. That's something that we've identified as being quite useful so that you can see that. And of course, we can set the granularity of what we want to see here as part of this. Now that you can see the sitemap, let me go and just check. This application, I think, does already exist on my local machine, but just in the true nature of a good demo, let me go and delete the entire code base. And we can rerun the software factory execution. And I can, excuse me, that was a second sneeze. All right, so yeah, this app, it's still pretty small, but it's not nothing. It's about 9,000 lines of code. And we can say apply changes. And here's all of our code again, and we can launch this up in Visual Studio. And I think a good place to start before we getting into how this is all wired up is, let me just show you guys the actual system running. So one little thing here, just to keep in mind, there are these instructions on the README, but you'll see that by default, it's selecting the client app. That's just because Visual Studio likes to select the first app. We do need to change that over to the API. And then what we'd want to do here is we'd want to just set the profile to be the client. That's just a little bit of because of the way that we've named things over here. The client is at the top. You'll notice in the previous app, the client was second in line. It just creates a little bit of fun for us, but that is a step that is documented. If you guys read the README, it'll remind you to do that, but that'll just prevent you from wondering why your application isn't launching. And this is the app, guys. So welcome. This is a simple sample Blazor application, code automated by Intent Architect, and we are looking forward to your feedback. We've got these two buttons over here. If I'm just going to hold down control because we haven't made them launch in new tabs yet. But if you launch these two up, the feedback is going to take you here. Guys, we would love to get your feedback, right? We absolutely thrive on the feedback from our clients. The feedback we've just got up to this point has really been amazing, and we've taken a lot of it into consideration. And then if you click on log an issue, that's going to take you to our typical, our standard support page. And so you can just go log your issue, ask a question. You're welcome to bring anything from there. You can see here that we've got invoices, customers, products. We can just go click on products, for example. And I've actually wired this up. I switched this. When you guys check this out, it'll be using in-memory database. I just switched my one over to SQL Server and just ran a migration and just captured all the data so that we've got something. So you can see we've just got some products. These are all just books, just some books off the top of my head. And you can see you've got a search over here. So if I type here traction, it's going to bring up traction. If I type here track, it's going to bring up nothing. Okay, and I'll show you guys why that's doing that. So that's just what Intent Architect's doing by default. We can go to, you can see it's also running off a debounce. It's pretty cool. You also see, guys, that we've got some layout systems coming into play here. So let's go to the customer. I can show you in a bit more detail. We've got an inline button over here. So of course, you'll notice with the part of 4.3 in terms of feature capability was a way for us to essentially have children of elements that are based on what we call traits. And so you can nest any component inside of any component the same way we can already do inside of HTML. So here you can see we've just nested inside a button inside of our table. And if we go to the add customer here, you can see that these are on the same lines, yep, they're essentially on the same line over here. And if we bring in the different screen resolutions, you'll see that it is going to be responsive, and I'll show you guys where we set that. Super easy, very, very straightforward system. Can go fill this in if we want, say save. It's going to create that for us over here. You'll also notice the async systems are now a little bit more visible because I think maybe my SQL Server had been asleep or just taking its time or whatever the case may be. And we can also see here the dialogs, right? So delete customer, yes, submit, we're happy to delete that one. Oh, there we go. Interesting. That is odd. Not sure why. We'd have to go take a look. Oh, you know why? It's because it's probably being used in an invoice, and we haven't set up an error message for that. So it would only barely be on Jonathan, for example, this new one. I hope that I'm selecting the right one. Yeah, it'll allow me to do that. If it is used by an invoice, you probably need to go and handle that yourself. So you need to have some kind of an exception. If that is the case, it's because of the foreign key in the database. Now that we have a real database in play, that foreign key is going to blow up on us if I try and actually delete something that is linked. So we'd probably want to then interpret that as a little pop-up to say, by the way, this is linked to an invoice. You can only archive this customer if we wanted to actually expand this app out. Here's our invoices. And if we click on one of them, you'll see that what we also did here is just to showcase a little bit more is we just set it up so that you've got an inline table inside of your form. We can add fields to that. We can, select, I don't know, 1 unit. You'll notice here if I make this 55, you'll notice that the total automatically updated to that. If I change it to 2, it'll change it to that. So I'll show you guys a little bit about how that stuff works, or you can go and explore it for yourself. I mean, we don't have a lot of time left, unfortunately, but you can go see how all of these things are connected up inside of the app. And we can also go ahead and remove these. So we can control these things, and you'll see that this is all happening in memory. So Intent Architect is actually able to handle that level of business logic for us just to go and wire those things up. And we can control our invoices as well. So that's just a quick overview of the application. Like I say, guys, we would love to get your feedback, how you guys are finding this, what you guys think about the direction of the application, and if there are any particular things you would love to see, would be really great if you guys could go and add those over here. The last thing I just wanted to touch on in the last few minutes is, of course, very, very key to building out applications is coming into our actual application over here. Is let's say I wanted to, let's just go back to the app and go to customers. Let's say I wanted to change this table to be a dense table. So go back to the code, customers, that'll be the customers list over here. Now, we've got by default, and this is just the default setting, you can control what setting it is. By default, all the Razor stuff is in what we call merge mode, which if you guys are familiar with the code management systems, which I'm sure most of our users are, that means that Intent Architect will add code, it'll update code, and it'll delete its code that it created, but it will not delete my code if I add code. So it's essentially going to ignore anything I do in here that Intent Architect isn't aware of. So as a simple example, maybe I want to change the grid to be a dense grid. Okay, so dense, I'm going to set that to true, and I'm going to say save, and if we're lucky, there we go. Okay, so you saw the little tick over there kick in, and now you can see this is now a dense grid. So it just made everything a little bit more dense for us. So if I rerun the software factory execution, and this is what's so important about this, no changes. So very happy to just leave my code there. I could also go in here and add a class or a style or whatever the case is, so I don't know, my table, save, and come back to Intent Architect. All good, no changes. Okay, so it's very happy to leave those things. Now, if I, for example, go here and I change the color of this button from secondary to, I don't know, to error, okay, that is going to change it to an error color over here. If I rerun the software factory execution though, it is going to pick that up. And that's because Intent Architect is managing this. Okay, it is managing this field. It's saying that this is secondary. That's because in the metadata, I specified it. So if I specify in the metadata, Intent Architect will take control. If I set it myself, which I can do in the code, it'll just allow that to do that. I can, if I don't want Intent Architect to ever touch this button ever again, I can say intent.ignore. Okay, and it's going to leave it alone, right? So you can do that. You can do that at the various levels. You can control this anything that you need. You always have the intent ignore systems. You can set things to intent fully if you want Intent Architect to always manage something and you don't want anybody to change that. So you always have that control at your fingertips. And the last thing I can just show you guys here is, of course, if I wanted to create another button, let's call it. I'm just going to go ahead and apply these changes. Just apply. Thank you. Let me go back to the code now. Let's go to add another button. So mud button, and we'll call it my custom button of some sort. And let's say that it will have a color which is success. If I say save, and we can just come back to this, there's my custom button. Okay, we probably just need to set the variant. This is what's nice about having patterns just do this stuff for you, right? It's filled, then it'll be like that. Okay, perfect. And if I come back to Intent Architect, rerun the software factory execution, it's going to be very happy to just leave that alone. Okay, so that's important because, of course, if you want to add your own, elements into the HTML, you can go ahead and do that. I can also do things like, if you guys saw earlier, if I head into my you'll see this, by the way, this is an app that is full stack, right? So it's a back end with a front end on top of it. So if we go into the customers and we went and, oh, this is important, actually. I should have mentioned this earlier because this is such a key feature for version 4.3, is we've added in this feature over here. Let's just do it on the search for the customers, for the page result, is you'll notice there's this new feature in Intent Architect called Open in IDE. It can't almost slip my mind. This is such a cool feature, because this is essentially going to allow you from the metadata, you could do this from anywhere in the metadata, to open up the IDE in the IDE, and you can see the actual files that are associated with this piece of metadata. So I can select any one of these files, or if I select the whole thing, so let's just go to our open an IDE over here for this, and I just click it, it's going to open up all the files. So there's the validator, I can close that down. Here's my handler, and close that down, and there's my query, close that down, and we're back to the razor. I can come back. Yeah, so almost missed this. Geez, that was close. Coming back here, it's going to open up this code for me over here. So now I can see exactly what's happening in the handler. And you can see, why was it just calling by the name? It's because by default, Intent Architect, as you know, has equals only. It's coming, guys. It's coming, the ability to do more advanced queries. At the moment, it is just based on equality. But very simple answer to this is I can just say intent ignore. And I can just tell this that I would like the name to just start with the request search. We'd have to relaunch that though. There's no hot reload for that I'm aware of, at least. Maybe there is, I don't know. And we can just launch up our app again. And now, coming back, here's our customer, there's our custom button. And if I type, wait, what's on the customers? I hope I'm on the right place. If I type Gareth, there you go, GA, Skulk, there we go. So Jay, it's going to bring up Joel and Jonathan. So you can see that now we've got the starts with, and it's working. Guys, that's everything we wanted to cover as part of today's webinar. I hope you guys have really enjoyed what you've seen as part of today's session. What I want to quickly do is I want to just throw up a QR code. Let me just shut down my screen share over here. And I'd like you guys to please let us know what you thought about the webinar. Let us know if you guys liked what you saw and if you found everything intuitive enough. If you guys do see anything that you think could be improved or anything that's quite blatantly worrying, we'd love to hear about it as well, because we're not afraid of criticism. We are very, very open to it. We are looking to you guys, our users, to share what you guys think and to help us evolve this into the platform that we all know it can truly become. All right, so let me just launch up this QR code. If you guys can please give us your feedback, take a few minutes just to do so. You should be able to see this. I'd like to thank you once again on behalf of myself and my team. It's very, very exciting to bring this stuff to you guys, and would absolutely love to hear what you have to say about it. All the best, and till the next one. Cheers.